The body was folded backward over the guardrail like it had been dropped there from above. Spine bent at an angle that made Officer Daniel Mercer stop breathing for a full 3 seconds before instinct took over. The man's head lolled toward the asphalt. Throat torn open so deeply the night air made a faint whistling sound as it passed through exposed cartilage. What remained of his chest cavity had been ripped outward, ribs cracked and peeled apart with surgical precision, as if something had wanted inside him, and had known exactly how to get there. Mercer swallowed hard and forced himself to step closer. Blood streaked the road in long, smeared arcs, leading away from the body and vanishing into the tree line that bordered Old Stage Road. The smell hit him next. Copper-thick blood, wet pine needles, and something animal. Musky and rank, like a kennel left too long in the heat. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. His radio crackled. "Dispatch to Mercer. You still on scene?" "Yeah," he said, voice tight. "You're gonna want detectives. And wildlife control. Maybe more." The woman was hiking alone when she found the first body 2 weeks earlier. That one had been partially devoured, discovered near the Bar Trail access point just after dawn. A mountain lion, Parks and Wildlife had said. Tragic but explainable. Then came the jogger in Palmer Park. Then the homeless man found beneath the I-25 overpass near Cimarron Street, torn apart in a way that didn't match any known animal attack. Now this. Mercer had been a cop in Colorado Springs for 13 years. He knew the rhythms of the city, the way military exercises rattled windows at night, how the mountains funneled weather into sudden violence, how disappearances were usually written off as hiking accidents or people wanting to vanish. He also knew when something didn't fit. This didn't fit at all. Detectives arrived within 20 minutes. Floodlights washed the scene in harsh white, flattening shadows but doing nothing to erase the sense that the forest beyond the road was watching them. Mercer stood with his hands on his hips, jaw clenched, as forensic techs worked around the body. "Look at the spacing on these wounds," one of them said quietly. "Claw marks are too far apart for a cat." "Bear?" another suggested. The tech shook her head. "Bear would have crushed the skull. This thing avoided it." Mercer glanced toward the trees again. The blood trail was already darkening, sinking into the soil like it belonged there. That night he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the way the ribs had been pulled open. Not torn randomly, but separated, like hands prying open a door. He dreamed of footsteps pacing outside his bedroom window, heavy but controlled, stopping just long enough to let him know they were there. By the end of the week, there were 2 more attacks. The department started using words like task force and containment. Parks and Wildlife brought in specialists who set traps along the outskirts of the city, near Cheyenne Canyon, the edges of Garden of the Gods, the wooded slopes above Manitou Springs. Nothing triggered them. Nothing showed up on trail cameras except blurred motion and the occasional reflection of eyes too high off the ground to belong to any known animal. Mercer dug into old files. He stayed late, flipping through cold cases dating back decades. Missing hikers. Unidentified remains found mauled beyond recognition. Attacks written off as animal incidents despite inconsistencies. Every few years, clustered around the same areas, always near the mountains, always quietly buried beneath paperwork. The oldest file he found was from 1978. 2 soldiers from Fort Carson, missing during a nighttime training exercise near North Cheyenne Canyon Park. Their bodies were never recovered. The report mentioned unusual damage to their equipment. Mercer leaned back in his chair, skin prickling. "What the hell are you?" he whispered. The answer came 3 nights later. The call came in just after midnight. Another attack, this time behind a strip mall near Nevada Avenue. Mercer was close. He arrived before backup, tires squealing as he cut the cruiser lights and rolled to a stop. The alley was dark, trash dumpsters casting long shadows. He stepped out, hand on his weapon, breath fogging in the cold air. That's when he heard it. Breathing. Not ragged, not panicked, measured. Mercer followed the sound to the far end of the alley, where something large crouched over a body. The smell hit him first, blood and wet fur. Then the sound of bone cracking between powerful jaws. "Police!" he shouted, weapon raised. "Show me your hands." The thing looked up. Moonlight slid across it, and Mercer's mind rejected what his eyes were telling him. It was huge, easily 7 feet tall when it rose onto its hind legs. Fur covered its body in thick, dark layers, muscles rolling beneath it with horrifying grace. Its head was lupin but wrong, elongated, intelligent eyes set forward, teeth too deliberate. A werewolf, not a story, not a costume, real. It met his gaze and didn't run. Instead, it smiled. Mercer fired. The first shot hit it in the shoulder. The second struck its chest. Staggered but didn't fall. It lunged forward, closing the distance faster than Mercer thought possible. He felt claws rake across his vest, the impact throwing him against the brick wall hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Pain exploded across his ribs. The werewolf loomed over him, breath hot and rank, eyes gleaming with something that looked disturbingly like recognition. It cocked its head, studying him, then stepped back as sirens wailed in the distance. With one last look, almost curious, it vanished upward, scaling the wall and disappearing onto the rooftops with impossible ease. Mercer lay there gasping, blood in his mouth, mind shattering around a single undeniable truth. They'd never been alone in these mountains. The department buried the incident. Officially, Mercer had been attacked by a large animal. Unofficially, he was warned firmly not to pursue the matter. A man in a clean jacket met him in the hospital and asked pointed questions about what he'd seen. Mercer answered carefully, watching the man's eyes the way he'd watched the werewolves. But Mercer didn't stop. He went back to Old Stage Road alone a week later, following instinct instead of orders. He found the place where the blood trail ended, not abruptly, but deliberately wiped clean. And carved into the bark of a pine tree, high above where any human could reach, was a symbol. 3 deep slashes crossing a circle. A marker. That night, the werewolf came for him. It didn't ambush him. It let him hear it coming, branches snapping, weight shifting, breath rolling through the dark. Mercer turned, gun raised, heart pounding, as it stepped into view. Up close, it was even worse. Scars crossed its fur. One ear was torn. Its eyes were ancient. "You've been watching us," Mercer said hoarsely. The werewolf tilted its head. Then it charged. Mercer fired until the gun clicked empty. The creature slammed into him, claws pinning his arms, its weight crushing the breath from his lungs. Pain flared as teeth grazed his neck. Not biting, but marking. Then everything went black. He woke at dawn, alone, blood dried on his skin. The mark burned into his flesh like a brand. Around him, the forest was quiet. Too quiet. The attacks stopped after that. Officially, Mercer returned to work, carrying the secret under his uniform. Some nights, when the moon was full, the mark on his neck burned hot, and he felt eyes on him from the edge of the city. And sometimes, when the wind came down from the mountains just right, he heard howls that sounded less like hunger and more like signals. Whatever had lived in Colorado Springs for decades hadn't been exposed. It had only decided he was worth noticing. And that realization was far more terrifying than the bodies they'd left behind. Chapter 2. The Moon Under the Skin. 6 months after the attacks stopped, Daniel Mercer learned that silence could be louder than sirens. It settled into his life like a second shadow, subtle, patient, impossible to outrun. Colorado Springs moved on the way cities always did. New headlines replaced old ones. Missing person flyers curled and faded on corkboards. The mountains stayed where they were, massive and indifferent, watching the city pretend nothing had ever stalked its edges. Mercer returned to duty. Officially, he'd healed. Broken ribs knitted clean. Deep scratches across his vest-rated trauma were chalked up to luck and training. The mark at the base of his neck, a 3-line scar that burned when the moon waxed, was hidden beneath his collar, beneath plausible deniability. Unofficially, nothing inside him was the same. He smelled things now. Really smelled them. Rain before it fell. Fear before it spoke. The city carried layers he'd never noticed before. Exhaust and ozone, sweat and adrenaline. The metallic tang of old blood trapped in concrete cracks. Sounds arrived with depth and direction. Heartbeats through walls, whispered arguments 3 floors up, the soft scuttle of animals beneath alleys. He told himself it was trauma. He told himself a lot of things. That night, the moon was nearly full. Mercer stood in the dim kitchen of his apartment, hands braced against the counter, breathing through a pressure that had been building since sunset. His skin felt tight, stretched too thin over bone. Heat pooled beneath his collar, the mark throbbing like a second pulse. Behind him, Emily laughed softly. "Danny," she said, patting barefoot across the floor. "You've been zoning out for 10 minutes. She slid her arms around his waist, warm and solid and real. Her cheek rested between his shoulder blades, and for a moment, just a moment, he let himself sink into the familiarity. Emily had stayed when others would have left. She'd believed his nightmares without demanding explanations. She was a paramedic. She understood broken things. Her scent hit him all at once. Not perfume, not soap. It flooded his senses, rich and overwhelming, and something in his chest twisted hard enough to hurt. His breath stuttered. His hands curled against the counter, nails biting into laminate. "Hey," she said gently. "You okay?" Mercer turned, forcing a smile that felt like a lie stretched over teeth. "Yeah, just tired." She studied him, always too perceptive, and then rose onto her toes to kiss him. It was soft at first, familiar, grounding. Her hands slid up his arms, and the contact sent a jolt through his nervous system like static. The pressure surged. Heat flared beneath his skin. His heartbeat thundered, too fast, too strong. The room sharpened unnaturally. Edges crisp, shadows deepening, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. Emily pulled back, frowning. "Your eyes." Pain ripped through him. It started in his spine, a grinding internal shift that stole his breath and bent him forward with a strangled sound. He staggered back, knocking into the table, dishes clattering. "Danny?" she said, alarm cutting through her voice. "What's wrong?" His hands clenched, fingers spasming as bones pressed outward, joints popping with wet, muffled cracks. His vision swam, colors bleeding into each other as something primal roared awake beneath his thoughts. "Run. Hide. Hunt. No," he gasped, gripping the edge of the counter hard enough to splinter it. Get back." She froze, eyes wide, watching his veins stood out along his forearms, muscles knotting and shifting beneath skin that darkened, hair pricking through pores. His jaw clenched as pressure built in his face, teeth aching, gums burning. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Emily took a step toward him, hand outstretched. "Danny, you're scaring me." That was the moment instinct surged past restraint. Mercer smelled her fear, sharp, electric, and something inside him reacted with a possessive snarl. He spun away with a growl that wasn't entirely human, slamming the bathroom door behind him just as pain detonated through his skull. The mirror shattered as he hit the sink. He dropped to his knees, gasping, as his reflection fractured into a dozen wrong versions of himself. His pupils blew wide, irises bleeding gold at the edges. His ears rang with a low, constant thrum, like distant howling. Bones shifted, muscles tore and reformed. Fur rippled beneath his skin in dark waves, then receded, leaving him trembling, half-changed, caught between forms. He screamed until his voice broke, until the sound dissolved into something raw and animal. "Danny!" Emily pounded on the door. "I'm calling 911. "No!" he snarled, the word distorted, forced past teeth that no longer fit together quite right. Don't open it." Silence stretched. When the pain finally ebbed, he collapsed against the tub, naked, shaking, human once more, barely. His heart hammered like it wanted out. The mark on his neck burned white-hot. He had crossed a line. The next night, the city tested him. It started as a routine foot pursuit. Petty theft turned violent, a suspect bolting through a construction zone near Cimarron Hills. Mercer was on patrol when the call came in, adrenaline already buzzing through his veins as he spotted the runner. A wiry man in a hoodie, panic radiating off him in waves Mercer could feel in his teeth. "Police!" Mercer shouted, vaulting a barrier. "Stop running!" The suspect didn't slow. They tore through half-lit streets, boots slapping pavement, breath ragged in the cold night air. Mercer gained ground effortlessly, legs pumping with a power that felt wrong. Too smooth, too fast. His lungs didn't burn. His heart didn't tire. The moon slid free of clouds overhead. The mark ignited. Heat surged through his body like gasoline catching flame. His senses exploded outward. The suspect's sweat, his fear, the faint copper tang of a cut on his hand. The world narrowed into a tunnel with one moving target at the end. Get him. Mercer stumbled, clutching at his chest as pain tore through him again. His stride faltered, then lengthened unnaturally. His hands curled, nails sharpening. His breath came out in a growl he barely recognized as his own. "Dispatch!" He panted into his radio, voice warping. "I need backup now." The suspect glanced back and screamed. Mercer saw himself reflected in a darkened storefront window. Eyes glowing, face twisting, teeth lengthening as his jaw strained against human limits. Fur ghosted along his arms, visible in flashes beneath the streetlights. He leapt. The distance collapsed under him in a single, impossible bound. He hit the suspect from behind, slamming him into the ground hard enough to crack concrete. The man wailed, thrashing, as Mercer loomed over him, fighting a tide of instinct that screamed for blood. His hands, closed around the man's collar, lifting him effortlessly. The smell of terror was intoxicating. Every part of him knew exactly how to end this. Sirens wailed nearby. Mercer snarled, shaking, teeth bared inches from the suspect's throat. For a heartbeat, he didn't know if he could stop. Then he did the only thing he could. He let go. The suspect collapsed, sobbing, scrambling away. Mercer staggered back, clutching his head as the change reversed violently, pain ripping through him in aftershocks. Backup arrived to find Officer Daniel Mercer on his knees, bleeding from the mouth, eyes wide and haunted. The report would say exhaustion, adrenaline, stress. Mercer knew better. That night, he stood on his apartment balcony alone, watching the moon crest the mountains. Emily was gone. Said she needed space, said she didn't recognize him anymore. He didn't blame her. The mark on his neck pulsed in time with the moon. Somewhere beyond the city, something answered. Mercer closed his eyes, breath fogging in the cold air, and understood with sick certainty that whatever had marked him months ago hadn't been a warning. It had been an invitation. And the next time the moon rose full and clear over Colorado Springs, he wasn't sure he'd still be able to refuse. Chapter 3. The Shape of the Hunt. The first time Daniel Mercer lost time, he didn't realize it had happened. It was a Tuesday, overcast, the kind of gray Colorado Springs morning that flattened the mountains into silhouettes and made the city feel smaller, boxed in. He woke on his couch instead of his bed, fully dressed, boots still on. His duty belt unbuckled and tossed onto the floor like it had been dropped in a hurry. His mouth tasted like copper. He sat up slowly, every muscle aching with the deep, bone-level soreness of overexertion. Not the sharp pain of injury, this was worse. This was the kind of ache that came after something had been used hard. Mercer rubbed his face and froze. There was dried blood under his fingernails. Not his. He knew that immediately, with a certainty that made his stomach turn. The apartment was silent. No broken furniture. No claw marks in the walls. The bathroom door was intact. The mirror, replaced after the last incident, hung unshattered, reflecting a tired, pale man with dark circles under his eyes and a three-line scar at the base of his neck that looked darker than it had the night before. He checked the clock. 6:14 a.m. The last thing he remembered was standing on the balcony, watching the moon sink behind the mountains, remembering the way something had answered him from far beyond the city limits. After that, nothing. Mercer showered until the water ran cold. He scrubbed his hands raw, watching pink swirl down the drain, trying not to think about where the blood had come from or why his shoulders felt like they'd carried a crushing weight for miles. He dressed and reported for duty. No one mentioned anything unusual. No overnight incidents flagged his name. No calls from dispatch asking where he'd been. His cruiser sat in its assigned spot, undamaged. His body cam log showed nothing out of the ordinary, routine patrol, end of shift, docked. It should have reassured him. Didn't. By noon, the pressure started building again. It wasn't pain this time. It was awareness. Mercer sat in his cruiser near Memorial Park, pretending to watch traffic while his senses stretched outward, uninvited. He could hear kids shouting on the playground 2 blocks away, each voice distinct. He could smell hot asphalt, fresh coffee from a cafe across the street, the faint oil and metal tang of a passing motorcycle. And beneath it all, something else. Old. wild, a thread pulling at him from the west, toward the foothills. Mercer's jaw tightened. He gripped the steering wheel until the leather creaked. No, he told himself. Not here. Not now. His radio crackled. All units, be advised. Possible 10 to 54 reported near Bear Creek Canyon. Hiker found injured. Unknown assailant. Medical en route. Mercer was already moving. The drive took less than 10 minutes. He broke speed limits without realizing it, the cruiser responding like an extension of his body. The closer he got to the canyon, the louder the pull became, thrumming beneath his skin like a second heartbeat. The trailhead was chaos. An ambulance idled near the dirt lot, lights painting the trees red and blue. A small crowd of hikers clustered together, faces pale, voices low and frantic. A parks and wildlife truck sat off to one side, doors open. Mercer parked and stepped out. The smell hit him immediately. Blood, fear, pine sap crushed underfoot, and something familiar enough to make his stomach drop. A young man lay on a stretcher near the tree line, chest bandaged, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath. His clothes were shredded, skin beneath marked with deep, parallel gashes. Claw marks. Mercer crouched beside him. "Hey," he said softly. "I'm Officer Mercer. Can you tell me what happened?" The man's eyes fluttered open. They locked onto Mercer's face and widened in sudden, animal terror. He was huge. The man rasped, voice raw. "Not a bear. Not." He coughed, grimacing. It stood up, looked right at me. Mercer felt the mark on his neck pulse. "Did it say anything?" Mercer asked. The man shook his head weakly. "Didn't need to. Knew I saw it. His breath hitched. "It let me live." That sent a cold spear straight through Mercer's chest. "Why?" Mercer asked. The man swallowed. Felt like it wasn't finished. Like I was a message. Before Mercer could respond, a parks and wildlife officer stepped closer. "We'll take it from here, officer. This area's under our jurisdiction." Mercer looked up slowly. The man standing over him wore the standard green uniform, but the scent was wrong. Clean, controlled, masked, predator hiding as prey. "I'm staying," Mercer said. The officer's eyes flicked to the mark just visible above Mercer's collar. For a split second, something unreadable passed between them. "Of course," the man said smoothly. "Wouldn't want you missing this." That night, the city cracked. Reports flooded in after sunset. Livestock torn apart on the outskirts near Broadmoor Bluffs. A security guard hospitalized after something slammed him through a chain-link fence near an industrial park. Power outages rippled through western neighborhoods as transformers blew, one after another, like something heavy had been moving across rooftops. Mercer was ordered off duty. He ignored it. He followed the pull. It led him into the foothills above Manitou Springs, into forest thick enough to swallow sound. The moon rose full and white between jagged peaks, bathing the trees in silver. Mercer moved without thinking, boots silent on stone and pine needles, his breath steady despite the distance covered. He wasn't alone. He felt them before he saw them, circling presences, keeping pace just beyond sight, watching, measuring. The clearing came suddenly. A natural bowl of rock and earth, ancient and scarred. Symbols were carved into the stone walls, circles and slashes, layered over one another, some old enough to be weathered smooth, others fresh and bleeding sap from wounded trees. Torches burned along the perimeter. Figures stepped out of the shadows. They weren't all the same. Some were fully changed, towering, furred forms with glowing eyes and massive frames. Others stood closer to human, features subtly wrong. Too tall, too still, eyes reflecting the moonlight just a fraction too brightly. Pack, and at its center, the one with the scars, the werewolf who had marked him, stepped forward, movements unhurried, powerful. Up close, it was even larger than Mercer remembered, fur streaked with gray muscle packed dense beneath its hide. One ear hung torn, the edges healed badly. "You came," it said. The voice wasn't a growl. It was speech, rough and deep, shaped by a mouth not meant for it. Mercer's hand hovered near his weapon, though he knew how useless it would be. "You've been killing people." The werewolf tilted its head. "Hunting. "You're in the city," Mercer snapped. "You're tearing it apart." A low ripple of sound passed through the pack. Not laughter, but something close. "You built your city on our hunting grounds," the werewolf replied. "You paved over trails older than your laws. We stayed hidden. We took what we needed from the edges." His eyes burned into Mercer. "Then you found us." "I didn't ask for this," Mercer said, voice tight. "No," the werewolf agreed. "You were chosen." Mercer felt the truth of it settle into his bones, heavy and inevitable. "Why me?" The werewolf stepped closer. Heat rolled off it, wild and alive. "Because you didn't run. Because you looked at me and fired. Because even now, part of you understands what we are." "And the attacks?" Mercer demanded. "The bodies." "A test," the werewolf said simply. "The old balance is breaking. Others like us are moving closer to human cities. Louder, sloppier. They don't respect the rules." It leaned in, breath hot against Mercer's face. "We need someone who can walk both sides." The clearing shifted. Mercer realized too late that the pack had closed in behind him. "You want me to help you cover it up?" Mercer said. "No," the werewolf said. "We want you to stop what's coming." A distant howl rose from beyond the ridge. Long, unfamiliar, carrying a note of something wrong. The pack tensed instantly. Several turned toward the sound, hackles lifting. The scarred werewolf's expression darkened. "That's not ours," it said. The ground shook. Something massive moved through the forest below, snapping trees like twigs. The air filled with the stench of rot and old blood, strong enough to make Mercer gag. Eyes ignited in the darkness. Too many, too bright. Whatever emerged from the trees was larger than the others, its shape warped and uneven, fur patchy, skin split and raw in places like it had been forced into a form it couldn't hold. An abomination, the scarred werewolf snarled. "Run, Mercer." Mercer didn't argue. The thing charged. The clearing exploded into violence. Mercer dove aside as claws the size of machetes slammed into the stone where he'd been standing. Rock shattered. A werewolf leapt, colliding with the creature mid-charge, both of them tumbling in a blur of fur and blood. Mercer ran. Branches tore at him as he sprinted through the trees, heart hammering, lungs burning for the first time in months. Behind him, the forest roared with sound, howls, snarls, bone-crunching impacts. The pull inside him surged, demanding release. Fight, it urged. Hunt. Mercer skidded to a stop at the edge of a ravine. He turned as the abomination burst from the trees, eyes locked on him alone. Smiled. Not with intelligence. With hunger. Mercer raised his hands, shaking. "I don't know what I am yet," he said aloud, voice lost in the chaos. "But I know this ends now." The mark on his neck ignited. Pain and power flooded him in equal measure as his body answered the call he'd been denying. Bones shifted, not fully, not yet, but enough. Strength surged. His vision sharpened, the world snapping into brutal clarity. The creature lunged. Mercer stepped forward to meet it. The last thing he heard before impact was the scarred werewolf's voice, echoing through the night. "If you survive this, you're one of us." And then the darkness swallowed everything. Chapter 4. Teeth in the Dark. Daniel Mercer woke to the sound of breathing that wasn't his own. It was deep, rhythmic, close enough that he could feel it vibrate through the ground beneath his cheek. For a terrifying second, he thought he was still in the clearing, still facing the abomination, still mid-impact, bones breaking, blood flying. Then the smells hit him. Damp stone, old fire, iron and pine resin. He groaned and tried to move. Pain flared instantly, sharp and bright, snapping him fully awake. "Easy," a voice rumbled nearby. "You push now, you'll tear what's knitting." Mercer opened his eyes. He was inside a cavern, natural, wide, the ceiling disappearing into darkness above. Firelight flickered along the walls, revealing ancient claw marks gouged deep into the stone, layered over one another like a history written in violence. Symbols, Circles crossed with slashes, spirals, jagged lines were carved everywhere, some glowing faintly as if the rock itself remembered them. Several figures stood around him. Not human, not fully beast. Closest was the scarred werewolf, the one who had marked him. In this light, Mercer could see details he'd missed before. Fur dark as wet earth streaked with silver, old scars crossing its chest and arms like tally marks. One eye was clouded, pale with age or injury, but the other burned sharp and aware. "You're alive," Mercer rasped. A corner of the werewolf's mouth pulled back, showing a hint of fong. "Barely. You fell 30 feet into a ravine and still tried to stand. That earned you some respect." "Lucky me," Mercer muttered. A smaller figure stepped forward, female. Mercer realized, her frame lean and powerful, for a pale gray that caught the firelight like frost. Her eyes were amber, intelligent and wary. "I'm Nida," she said. Her voice was smoother than the scarred one's, but no less dangerous. "I stopped you from bleeding out. Try not to undo my work." Mercer swallowed. "Thanks." Another presence loomed behind her. Tall even by werewolf standards, broad-shouldered, with black fur so dark it swallowed light. His muzzle bore fresh blood not yet cleaned away, and his eyes glowed a deep, furious red. "That thing nearly split the pack," he growled. "Human or not, he shouldn't be here." "Enough, Corin," the scarred werewolf said sharply. Corin bared his teeth. "You're trusting him because he carries your mark, Rashad. That doesn't mean he belongs." The name hit Mercer like a weight. "Rashad," he repeated softly. "That's your name." The scarred werewolf, Rashad, inclined his head once. "Leader of this pack, or what remains of it." Mercer shifted carefully, pushing himself up onto one elbow. His body ached, but it felt different, stronger in places, tighter, like something inside him had locked into alignment instead of tearing loose. "What was that thing?" Mercer asked. "The one that attacked the clearing." Silence rippled through the cavern. Nida's jaw tightened. Corin looked away. Rashad's voice dropped. "That was not a wolf." "Could have fooled me," Mercer said. "No," Rashad said. "Wolves are born, or made cleanly. That creature was forced." Mercer frowned. "Forced how?" Rashad turned and gestured deeper into the cavern. Firelight revealed more figures there. Werewolves tending wounds, binding gashes with strips of leather and cloth. Some bore burns that smoked faintly, flesh slow to heal. "Someone is breaking the old laws," Rashad said, "creating soldiers instead of kin." "And you think that someone is the enemy you mentioned," Mercer said. "I know it," Rashad replied. Nida crouched beside Mercer, her gaze steady. "There's another pack, older than ours, stronger. They stayed hidden long before humans built cities here. We call them the Black Hollow Pack." Corin snorted. "They call themselves something else." "What?" Mercer asked. Corin's eyes flicked to Rashad, then back. "Kings." Mercer felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who leads them?" Rashad didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out and placed 2 fingers against the mark on Mercer's neck. Pain flared, sharp, electric, but Mercer didn't pull away. Images flooded his mind without warning. Moonlight over blood-soaked stone. A massive shape standing atop a ridge, for pale as bleached bone. Eyes glowing and unnatural, cold blue. A voice not loud, not angry, commanding. "Bring him to me." Mercer gasped, sucking in air. Rashad stepped back. "You felt him?" Mercer nodded slowly. "He knows about me." "Yes," Rashad said. "And that's the problem." Before Mercer could ask more, a howl echoed through the cavern's upper tunnels. Not close, but not far. Every werewolf in the chamber froze. Nida's head snapped up. "Scouts!" Moments later, a young werewolf burst into the cavern, fur dark with sweat and blood, chest heaving. He shifted halfway as he ran, voice strained. "They crossed the ridge," he panted. "At least 6, maybe more." And his eyes flicked to Mercer. "They're asking for the marked one," Corin roared. "I told you this would happen." Rashad raised one clawed hand. "Enough." "Where?" "Moving fast," the scout said. "Driving prey ahead of them. They want us to scatter." Mercer pushed himself fully upright, ignoring the pain. They're hunting like a military unit. Rashad's gaze sharpened. You understand tactics. I was human law enforcement yesterday, Mercer said grimly. And whatever that thing was, it wasn't wild. It was deployed. Nida studied him for a long moment. You think like us more than you should. Don't flatter me, Mercer replied. I'm terrified. That earned him a few low chuckles from nearby werewolves. Brief, humorless. Rashad turned to the pack. Evacuate the wounded deeper. Corin, take the eastern tunnels and collapse them after passage. Nida, I'll stay with him, Nida said immediately. Corin's lip curled. He's bait. Yes, Nida said calmly. And the best trap we've had in decades. Mercer blinked. I'm standing right here. Rashad met Mercer's eyes. You don't belong to them yet, and you don't belong to us fully either. That makes you unpredictable. Great, Mercer said. Always wanted that on my resume. The first explosion hit the mountainside minutes later. The cavern shook violently, dust raining from the ceiling. Somewhere above them, stone collapsed with a thunderous roar. They're using fire, Corin snarled. Incendiaries. Wolves don't use fire, Mercer said. Rashad's expression darkened. These do. They moved. Mercer followed Nida through a narrow tunnel, his body responding faster than his thoughts. He leapt gaps he should never have cleared, ducked falling stone on instinct, senses screaming warnings seconds before danger struck. Above them, the night fractured into chaos. Black hollow wolves poured down the slopes, larger on average than Rashad's pack, their movements disciplined, their attacks coordinated. Some wore crude metal harnesses etched with glowing runes. Others carried torches burning with green-tinged flame that hissed unnaturally against the rain-soaked forest. Mercer skidded to a stop beside a fallen log as a wolf twice his size landed nearby, claws tearing into earth. It wasn't fully formed. Its limbs bent wrong. The spine bowed unnaturally. Foam dripped from its jaws as it snarled. Nida didn't hesitate. She leapt, slamming into it with brutal precision, snapping its neck with a sharp twist that made Mercer flinch. That's mercy, she said grimly. More shapes emerged from the trees. Mercer's heart hammered as the pull inside him surged again. Stronger now, demanding release. His hands shook. I don't know how long I can hold it, he admitted. Nida's eyes softened, just a fraction. Then don't. Not fully. Not yet. Let it lend you strength. How do I control it? She smiled thinly. You don't. You negotiate. The ground trembled. A presence rolled through the forest like a storm front. Every wolf, friend and enemy alike, stilled. Then he stepped into the clearing. He was enormous, larger than any of the others, his height rivaling a grizzly standing upright. His fur was bone-white, marred by veins of black that pulsed faintly beneath the skin like something alive and wrong. One side of his face was scarred smooth, as if burned and healed improperly, giving him a mask-like stillness. His eyes were ice blue, not glowing, reflective, calculating. He wore no harness, no runes, no weapons. He didn't need them. The black hollow wolves parted instinctively as he advanced, movements slow, deliberate, utterly confident. Rashad stepped forward from the opposite tree-line, blood matting his fur, posture proud despite his injuries. You broke the accords, Vaelric, Rashad growled. Vaelric smiled. It was almost human. Accords only matter when both sides are still afraid, Vaelric said. His voice carried effortlessly, smooth and deep, with no hint of strain. You hide in caves and pretend balance still exists. I'm done pretending. His gaze slid to Mercer. The world seemed to narrow. So this is him, Vaelric said softly. The bridge. Mercer felt suddenly naked, every secret exposed. You marked him without understanding what he could become, Vaelric continued. That was careless, Rashad. Rashad bared his teeth. You will not have him. Vaelric tilted his head. That depends. The air grew heavy, pressure building like a storm about to break. Vaelric's eyes never left Mercer. Come with me, Daniel Mercer. I can teach you control, purpose. I can show you how to stop fearing what's under your skin. Mercer swallowed hard. Nida shifted beside him, ready to strike. Rashad's growl shook the ground. Veilric's smile widened just enough to show fangs long and flawless. Or, he said quietly, I can tear this mountain apart until there's nothing left for you to protect. The moon slid free of clouds overhead, bathing Veilric in cold light. For a moment, just a moment, Mercer felt the pull respond to him, waiting. The chapter ended with Mercer taking a single step forward. Not toward Veilric, not toward Rashad, but into the space between them, and the mountains held their breath. Chapter 5. When the mountain breathes. The mountain screamed, not metaphorically, not poetically. Stone split with a sound like thunder tearing itself apart. A deep, grinding roar that rolled through the foothills and echoed down into the sleeping streets of Colorado Springs. Birds exploded from the tree-line in a panicked black cloud. Somewhere far below, car alarms began to wail. Daniel Mercer felt it in his bones. The moment his foot touched the ground between Rashad and Veilric, the world answered. The pull inside him surged violently. No longer a whisper or a suggestion, but a demand. Hot, feral, ancient. His vision sharpened until every leaf edge glinted like a blade. He could hear hearts pounding in chests all around him, could taste fear and rage in the air like ozone before lightning strikes. Veilric's pale eyes flared, just slightly. Oh! The enemy Alpha murmured. You feel it now. Rashad snarled, stepping forward. Step away from him, Veilric. Mercer raised one hand without looking back. Wait! The word surprised all of them. Rashad froze. Nida's breath caught beside him. Even the black hollow wolves hesitated, tension rippling through their ranks like a held breath. Mercer stared straight at Veilric, forcing his voice steady despite the storm raging under his skin. You want me, he said. Call off your pack. Veilric chuckled softly, still thinking like a human officer, negotiating while blood is already spilling. As if summoned by the words, a scream tore through the forest to their left. Mercer turned just in time to see one of Rashad's wolves, a young male with tawny fur, go down under 3 black hollow attackers. Claws flashed, bone cracked. No! Nida shouted, launching forward. Rashad moved at the same instant, colliding with the attackers in a blur of fur and violence. The clearing erupted. Veilric sighed. So impatient. The battle exploded outward like a detonation. Mercer didn't remember deciding to move. He just did. The first black hollow wolf came at him low and fast, jaws snapping. Mercer sidestepped instinctively and drove his elbow down into its spine with a force that sent shockwaves up his arm. The wolf hit the ground hard, skidding across dirt and stone. Mercer stared at his hand. No pain, no fracture, just power humming beneath his skin. Mercer! Nida shouted. Behind you! He spun as another wolf lunged. This one was bigger, shoulders humped, eyes glowing sickly green. Mercer caught it midair. Caught it. Momentum slammed into him, but he held, feet digging furrows into the ground as he twisted and hurled the creature sideways into a tree. The trunk cracked. The wolf dropped, unmoving. Mercer's breath came fast. This isn't possible. Nida appeared at his side, blood streaking her muzzle. It is now. Above them, fire rained. Green-flamed torches arced through the air, striking stone and earth. Where the flames touched, the ground hissed and smoked, vegetation withering instantly. One struck a werewolf mid-leap, engulfing him in screaming fire. Rashad roared, a sound of pure fury, and tore through 2 black hollow wolves to reach the burning body. He slammed his bulk over the flames, smothering them with his own fur, skin blistering instantly. Veilric watched it all with mild interest. This is why you're losing, he called over the chaos. You still protect the weak. Rashad turned, eyes blazing. And that is why you're already dead, he charged. The impact when Rashad hit Veilric shook the clearing. Stone shattered beneath their feet as Alpha met Alpha, claws crashing, jaws snapping inches from throats. Valeric slid back only a step, digging furrows into the earth, then drove his knee up into Rashad's ribs with brutal precision. Rashad grunted, staggered, but didn't fall. Mercer felt something twist in his chest. "Nida," he shouted. "We need to stop the fire." She nodded sharply. "Then follow me and don't slow down." They ran. Mercer vaulted fallen logs, ducked under snapping jaws, his body moving faster than thought. The forest felt smaller now, slower, like it couldn't keep up with him. He tore a torch from a black hollow wolf's grasp and slammed it into the dirt, stamping it out with a growl that tore from his throat unbidden. Another wolf leapt him. Mercer reacted on instinct, too much instinct. He caught the wolf by the throat and slammed it down, fangs bared inches from its face. The smell of fear hit him like a drug. "End it," the hunger whispered. "One bite." Mercer froze. The wolf's eyes widened. "Please," it rasped. Human voice, cracked and terrified. "I didn't choose this." That broke the spell. Mercer released him and stumbled back, chest heaving. "Run." The wolf didn't argue. Nida stared at Mercer with something like awe and fear. "You spared him." "I almost didn't," Mercer admitted. A shadow fell over them. They turned as Valeric landed nearby, Rashad crashing into the trees behind him with a sound like a building collapsing. Nida shifted instantly, placing herself between Mercer and the enemy Alpha. Valeric smiled approvingly. "Loyal. I admire that." Rashad staggered back into view, blood matting his fur, one arm hanging uselessly. "Stay away from him," he growled. Valeric didn't even look at him. His attention was fixed on Mercer. "You felt it, didn't you? How easy it is. How natural." Mercer clenched his fists. "You did this. Those forced wolves. The fire." "Yes," Valeric said calmly. "And I'll do worse if I must. Because what's coming requires strength you don't yet understand." "What's coming?" Mercer demanded. Valeric's eyes flicked upward, to the moon, to the mountains beyond. "Something older than all of us has started to stir. You feel it when the ground shakes. When the night grows too quiet." The mountain rumbled again, distant but unmistakable. Even the wolves paused. Rashad's expression shifted, fear, sharp and rare. "You woke it." Valeric's smile widened. "I prepared it." The words slammed into Mercer harder than any blow. Nida whispered, "The deep howler." Rashad snarled, "Don't speak that name." Mercer looked between them. "What is he talking about?" Rashad took a step closer to Mercer, voice low and urgent. "A legend. A thing older than packs. Older than borders. If it rises." Valeric interrupted softly. "Everything hunts, or everything dies." The ground cracked. A fissure split the clearing open with a violent lurch, throwing wolves and debris aside. Mercer barely kept his footing as hot air poured from the lair, carrying a sound that was not quite a howl, not quite a roar. Something breathed beneath the mountain. Valeric stepped back, finally cautious. "The choice is yours, Daniel Mercer. Stand with those who cling to dying rules, or help me shape what survives." Rashad reached Mercer's side, bloodied but unbowed. "He lies. He always has." Nida grabbed Mercer's arm. "Whatever you decide, decide now." The black hollow pack regrouped, forming a semicircle around Valeric. Rashad's wolves did the same, wounded but defiant. Mercer stood between two worlds, the mark on his neck burning like molten metal. The mountain groaned again, louder this time. Mercer looked up at the moon, full, merciless, watching. "I won't be your weapon," Mercer said to Valeric, "and I won't be your prey." Valeric's smile faded, just a fraction. "Then you will be your own undoing." He raised one hand. The black hollow wolves lunged. Rashad roared and charged. Nida shifted mid-leap, slamming into an enemy wolf with lethal force. Mercer felt the choice lock into place. He didn't fully change, but he let the door open. The world exploded into motion. Mercer moved faster than ever before, striking, dodging, breaking lines, drawing attention away from the wounded. He fought like something newly born, raw but terrifyingly effective. And beneath it all, the mountain kept breathing. As the battle raged, Valeric slipped away into the smoke and chaos, his voice drifting back on the wind. "This isn't over, Daniel Mercer. This is only the first night you answered the call." The ground trembled one last time, harder than before. Somewhere deep below, something ancient shifted and began to wake. Mercer felt it, and for the first time he wasn't sure whether he was afraid or eager. Chapter 6. The Blood That Remembers. The mountain did not sleep. It only pretended to. Long after the fighting scattered into the trees and smoke thinned into ragged ribbons, the earth beneath Colorado Springs continued to murmur. Stones settling, pressure shifting. Something vast and patient turning over in its ancient bed. Daniel Mercer felt it even when he closed his eyes, especially when he closed them. They regrouped before dawn in a high ravine where the rock walls narrowed into a natural choke point. What remained of Rashad's pack moved quietly, wounded wolves supported by the uninjured, blood-streaking fur and skin alike. No one spoke unless they had to. Every sound seemed too loud against the waiting silence. Mercer sat on a slab of stone near a shallow fire, hands clasped, elbows on his knees. His clothes were torn, soaked through with blood that wasn't all his. The mark on his neck throbbed in a slow, steady rhythm that matched the mountain's breathing. Nida knelt beside him, rewrapping a gash along his forearm with practiced hands. "You heal fast," she said, not looking up. "Faster than you should." Mercer watched the firelight flicker across her face. "I feel it, like my body's arguing with itself about what it's supposed to be." She snorted quietly. "Welcome to the negotiation." Across the ravine, Rashad stood with Corin and two others. Elian, a broad-shouldered wolf with ash-brown fur and a missing eye, and Sarah, smaller, sharp-eyed, her movements quick despite the limp she carried. Their voices were low but tense. "He knew," Corin was saying. "Vaelric knew about the deep howler long before tonight." "Because he was told," Sarah replied. "Or because he woke it himself." Rashad said nothing at first. He stared out toward the distant city, lights dim under the retreating night. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy. "Both can be true." Mercer rose slowly and approached. "You said Vaelric didn't lie about everything," he said. "So start explaining." Rashad turned to face him fully. In the gray pre-dawn light, he looked older, fur dulled by blood and ash, scars standing out stark and pale. "What Vaelric spoke of," Rashad said, "is not a legend meant to frighten pups into obedience. It is an enemy older than our packs, older than your cities, older than the vampires themselves." Mercer frowned. "Vampires?" The word seemed to ripple through the ravine. Nida stiffened. Corin's lip curled. Elian spat onto the stone. Rashad nodded once. "You were always going to learn." Vaelric made certain of that. Mercer crossed his arms. "Start from the beginning." Rashad exhaled slowly. "Before there were lines drawn on maps, before humans learned to fear the dark, there were predators who did not hunt flesh alone. They hunted blood, its memory, its power. They learned how to stop time inside themselves." "Vampires," Mercer said. "Yes," Rashad replied. "But not the stories you know. Not the weak echoes humans tell each other to feel brave. The first vampires were kings of night. They ruled cities before cities had names." "And wolves?" Mercer asked. Rashad's gaze sharpened. "We were their answer." Silence fell. Nida spoke softly. "The wolves were created to hunt them." Mercer looked between them. "Created by who?" Rashad's jaw tightened. "By the world itself. By magic older than language." When the first vampires drank too deeply, when they began binding humans, bending bloodlines, making the night eternal, something pushed back. "The balance," Mercer murmured. "Yes," Rashad said. "We were born to break their control. Our claws tear through their flesh. Our blood burns theirs. We heal from wounds that would destroy them." Corin growled. "And they learned to fear us." Mercer absorbed that slowly. "So what changed?" Rashad's eyes darkened. "The vampires learned patience." He turned and gestured toward the mountain. "They stopped ruling openly. They went underground. Into vaults, into stone, into places even we would not follow. They slept. They waited." Sarah's voice cut in. And some of us forgot why we existed. Rashad nodded. Pacts fractured. Laws were written. We hid instead of hunted. We became caretakers instead of executioners. And Vaelric? Mercer asked. Rashad's expression twisted. Vaelric never forgot. The name carried weight. Resentment, fear, something close to grief. He believes the vampires are waking, Rashad continued. That one in particular has stirred. An ancient, older than most of his kind. One the vampires themselves buried. Mercer felt a chill crawl up his spine. Buried where? Rashad met his gaze. Under this mountain range. The ground seemed to shift just slightly as if in answer. Mercer let out a slow breath. So the thing breathing under us isn't a wolf? No, Nida said. It's worse. Elian spoke up, voice rough. They call it Sanguis Rex. Mercer blinked. The Blood King. Yes, Rashad said. An ancient vampire lord who learned to feed not just on blood, but on transformation itself. He drank from wolves, from witches, from creatures you would call myths. He didn't just steal power, he rewrote it. Mercer remembered the warped creature from the clearing, the uneven limbs, the wrongness of it. That's what Vaelric's been doing, he said slowly. Forcing changes. Making soldiers. To prepare, Rashad said. Or to offer tribute. Nida's voice dropped to a whisper. The Blood King doesn't rise alone. He wakes to an army. Mercer ran a hand through his hair. And the vampires want him back? No, Rashad said. Some do. Some are terrified of him. That's the danger. Vampires don't agree on anything, except survival. Corin snorted. And when they panic, cities burn. A distant rumble rolled through the ravine. Not loud, not violent, persistent. Mercer felt his teeth vibrate. So where do I fit into this? He asked quietly. Rashad studied him for a long moment. You are something new. Mercer's mouth tightened. That's not reassuring. You survived a partial change without guidance, Rashad continued. You stood between alphas. You felt the mountain respond to you. Nida nodded. The Blood King feeds on transformation, on unstable power. If he wakes fully, he'll feel me, Mercer finished. Yes, Rashad said. And Vaelric knows it. Vaelric intends to use you as bait, Sarah said flatly. Or as a weapon, Corin added. Mercer laughed once, sharp and humorless. Figures. The fire snapped, sending sparks into the air. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Nida said, There are others. Mercer looked up. Others. Vampires, she said. Not allied with the Blood King. Old clans who remember the wars. They won't move openly, but they watch. Rashad nodded. One already has. As if summoned by the words, the shadows at the far edge of the ravine deepened. Mercer's instinct screamed. Don't move, Rashad murmured. A figure stepped into the firelight. Human-shaped, tall, impossibly still. He wore a long coat the color of dried wine, collar turned up against the morning chill. His hair was dark, pulled back neatly, his face sharp and pale, too perfect, like a statue carved from marble and left too long in moonlight. His eyes were black, not dark, black. Good morning, the vampire said pleasantly. You've made quite a mess. Every wolf bristled. Rashad stepped forward. State your name. The vampire smiled, showing no fangs. Elena Vasquez sends her regards. Mercer's pulse jumped. He remembered the name from old files, whispered rumors. Wealth, influence, shadows behind power. And you are? Mercer asked. The vampire's gaze slid to him, pinning him in place. Lucian Arkwright, he said. Envoy, historian, survivor. Nida growled low in her throat. Lucian glanced at her with mild curiosity. Ah, a gray. You don't see many of your line anymore. She bared her teeth. Careful. Lucian raised his hands slightly. Peace. If I wished you harm, you wouldn't know I was here. Mercer believed him. What do you want? Mercer asked. Lucian's smile thinned. To prevent a catastrophe. The Blood King's stirrings have been noticeable. Vaults are opening. Old wards are failing. Vaelric is not wrong about that. Rashad snarled. Then why help him? Lucian's eyes flicked to Rashad, then back to Mercer. We aren't. He's an extremist. Always has been. He believes the only way to kill Sanguis Rex is to wake him fully and tear him apart. Mercer winced. That sounds reckless. It is, Lucian agreed. But he may succeed. And if he fails, everything dies. The mountain breathed again, longer this time. Lucian's composure cracked, just slightly. He looked toward the rock wall. We're running out of time. Mercer stepped closer. So what's your plan? Lucian studied him openly now. You! Nida swore under her breath. Rashad's claws slid out. No! Lucian didn't flinch. Daniel Mercer is something the Blood King has never tasted. A bridge between wolf and man, anchored by choice rather than bloodline. That makes him dangerous. Mercer felt the pull stir, curious. And you want to use me, Mercer said. I want to protect you, Lucian replied. Until we can decide which way the blade should fall. Rashad laughed bitterly. Vampires protecting wolves. The world truly is ending. Lucian inclined his head. Temporary alliances are the only ones that matter at the end of the world. Before Rashad could respond, a scream echoed from somewhere deep within the mountain. Not animal, not human, ancient. The ravine shook violently. Stone cracked. Dust poured down like rain. Lucian's eyes widened. He's closer than I thought. Mercer felt it then. Felt him. A vast, cold awareness brushing against his own. Tasting the air. Following the thread of his transformation like a scent. Something ancient smiled in the dark. Rashad grabbed Mercer's shoulder. We move. Now. Lucian stepped back into the shadows. Choose quickly, Daniel Mercer. Vaelric is already moving. And the Blood King has noticed you. The vampire vanished. The mountain roared. Mercer stood trembling, the mark on his neck burning like fire. Tell me where Vaelric went, he said. Rashad met his eyes. Toward the old tunnels. Toward the vault. Mercer nodded, heart hammering. Not with fear alone, but with something sharper. Resolve. Then that's where I'm going, he said. Nida stepped beside him without hesitation. You won't go alone. The mountain breathed again, slow, hungry. And somewhere deep below, an ancient vampire king began to wake, already dreaming of the taste of wolf blood and the man who stood between worlds.